Hello, everybody. This is Michael Harding with On the Arts. I'm very pleased to let you know that we're going to have two very fine guests on the show today. First off, we have Mayor John Pike. You may have heard of him. He's a big guy here in St. George, knows what's going on. And also later on, we are going to have the conductor of the St. George Chamber Singers. Hopefully, we'll be able to have them together, have a little bit of conversation. As an introduction, for those of you who don't know, my name is Michael Harding. I am your host for this show, of course, but a little bit about myself. I have been an artist almost all of my life. I've been a professional actor for about 25 years and have worked really all over the country and even in England a little bit. It was my pleasure to go over there and work at some theaters. I did work at one that some of you may have heard about, Shakespeare's Globe, which was the thrill of a lifetime to actually get on that stage. I've worked in Seattle, I've worked in Washington, D.C., in Delaware, South Carolina, Oregon, and here in Utah, actually quite a bit, up in Salt Lake at the Pioneer Theater Company, as well as some smaller organizations. As well, I am a musician and a playwright and a director. Some people would say I'm just ADD, but I'd like to say I'm working on being well-rounded. And also a little bit of history. My father is a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I'm a big supporter of the military, but I have to say I feel kind of bad for my dad. He being a lieutenant colonel, I'm an actor. My brother is a concert pianist, and my father doesn't know where he went wrong. He's a very confused man right now, but the arts are very well respected in my house, and I'm more than happy to have this show here for really anybody who doesn't know what's happening in the arts here around the St. George and southern Utah area. I mentioned a few shows ago that I don't know that it's a good thing that any theater or musical group or art gallery says to someone, hey, we're the best kept secret in St. George. I'd rather it not be a secret, and I want to use this time to let you know what's out there and invite you to participate and play with us. Now, in the studio right now, we do have Mayor Pike. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's great to be with you on the show.
Right. It's great to have you here. And I want to let you know on a personal note, I was recently involved with a production at St. George Musical Theater. I was the sound designer for Willy Wonka the Musical, and I was actually very close to the director. She is my wife. And some people wonder if that's not why I was roped into being the sound designer. Actually, it was my pleasure. But there was a special person in that cast for you, Mayor Pike. Who was that?
Well, my youngest daughter, Libby, was one of the Oompa Loompas, Michael, and so that made it a little extra special and for us, and we went to that production quite a few times. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
I know a lot of people who were sitting up in the technical booth or worked as house management. They would text me or my wife and say, the mayor's here again, which I think is tremendous support, not only as a mayor of the city, but also as a father.
Yeah.
And that's not your only daughter. Am I correct in that?
Well, my wife and I have 4 daughters.
Wow.
Yeah, we have 2 of them that are married and living in the northern part of the state. And then we have our youngest 2 still at home, one who's a high school senior and our youngest who is an 8th grader. So, and then we have one son right in the middle of all the girls. And then he's a student up at SUU. So we have good kids and frankly, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, we all love music, and some of them have done a fair bit with acting as well. So, in fact, I even acted on the Pioneer Memorial Theater stage once.
Did you really?
Yeah.
When was that?
I was very young. I was 13 years old,
mm-hmm.
and I played Amal in Amal and the Night Visitors.
Really?
Do you know that production at all?
I do very well.
Yeah.
You were the title character.
I was, and I didn't kind of realize at the time. My parents tricked me. They got me to audition. They knew the director. His name was, I think it was Frank Whiting, and so they knew him, and he was looking to have 2. He wanted to have a double cast because it's, kind of scary at age 13, 14. Your voice can change,
right.
Young, new talent, and so he cast Amal, double cast it, and so the only reason I was willing to to audition was because my mom and dad said, "Well, we'll audition too for the mother role and for one of the kings, because they have the three kings in this role." It's kind of the story of the Christ child is kind of what this is about,
Right.
And so anyway, I auditioned thinking, well, my mom and dad are really good singers, and they've been actors. They'd acted on that stage when they were in college, so I thought they'll get in, or one of them will. Well, they tricked me. They didn't really audition. They were just doing that so that I would, and they still deny that. But anyway, I loved it. I ended up doing more of the shows than planned, because the more experienced Amal, his voice changed right at the start of the show. So they really had to do some workarounds, and there were times he just kind of couldn't make it work. So I ended up, doing a few more of the performances than we thought. Anyway, I never did perform again on that theater, but I did have some fun in high school musicals at Skyline High School in Salt Lake, and no serious parts, but just a lot of fun. And so I love Broadway musicals, and my parents dragged me to Utah Opera Company, and I put up with that. Although there are some operas I love. Some of it's a little too heavy for me, but I love some of the real well-known ones. Just the beautiful music of Puccini and some of the other kind of masterful operas. So I really had no choice but to be involved in music, at least as I was growing up.
Right. Did you ever take private singing lessons?
A little bit. I took some private singing lessons, especially around that time when I was, trying to be Amal,
right.
in Amal and the Night Visitors. And I did have, my parents were both really good singers, so my parents taught me. And I have 5 other siblings, and we sang a lot together.
Really?
We even did a CD together. Just kind of quietly. We didn't mass produce it, but we did it for my mom when she was dying of leukemia. We surprised her and put together about 20 songs and gave it to her so that she could get better to it. She ended up dying 3 days after we gave it to her. So we were really glad. That's how she spent her last few days, was listening to our music, that, and in fact, we titled the CD "Songs My Mother Taught Me."
Oh, that's wonderful.
And you might know that Dvorak song called
Yes.
"Songs My Mother Taught Me." So we sang that as the title song on the CD, and then just a bunch of other songs that we loved. So anyway, I did have some training. Mostly we were trained as pianists.
Mm-hmm.
All 6 of us kids learned to play the piano, and some of us better than others, but we all played,
Right.
And I have one sister who actually majored in vocal performance at BYU, and she actually got her master's as well at BYU in vocal performance. So she's really the fine singer of us all, but all of us sing, and still once in a while we'll sing together, although I'm the only one that's living outside of the Salt Lake Valley.
Right.
Makes
So
it a little harder.
you make a special appearance.
I do.
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned that you all took piano and that you all sing somewhat. And
Yep.
I don't know if you ever ran into this, but my brother, being a concert pianist, people would come up to me all the time. And my brother was a special individual. He was practicing, 6-7 hours a day when he was 4. He was one of those
Wow.
very special, dedicated people
Yep.
to music and such. And I cannot tell you how many times people came up to me and said, "Oh, it must be wonderful having all that beautiful music in your house all the time." Well, I'm sure having had siblings that learn an instrument, you don't hear that beautiful music very often.
No.
I'll tell him, he started practicing at 5:30 in the morning. And there were some days, if I heard that 3-measure section one more time, it was going to drive me crazy.
That's exactly right. And that is how you learn. You got to do it over and over again. And I still have to do that. I'm certainly not a concert pianist, and I never did have that, I guess, that fire to really, pursue it that much. But I will tell you that my brothers and I, and in particular, I have two sisters as well, but we were all supposed to practice an hour and a half to 2 hours a day.
Right.
And, honestly, I've never been able to get my kids to do that much, but we did. And although, of course, we cheated a bit, in the early mornings, like your brother, not maybe quite that early, but pretty close, sometimes we'd be so tired and cold, and we'd be laying down by the heat vent trying to keep warm in the winter, and our mom would get up and say, come on, get back on that piano. But that's what it takes. And I'll tell you, I don't regret a minute of it. Not everyone can say that, but I think usually we're all glad that our parents get us to do those things that will someday come back to kind of bless our lives. And certainly that's what, piano in particular, but guitar, music, generally singing. I'm even an organist a little bit. I play the organ, which is not quite the same as the piano.
Not quite at all, no.
So the keyboard's the same, but, no sustain pedal. And of course, all the stops you've got to learn, a very different situation. But those are things my parents did for me, frankly, right. and I'm forever grateful.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very grateful to my parents as well. But, my father was a military man and such, so he likes the arts. He likes music. He likes the theater. But I have to tell you, it was my grandfather that got me into it. You mentioned playing the organ. He was a church organist.
Awesome.
And not for any particular denomination, but he would go where they needed an organist. And that was really his primary income for a long time. And I remember he would play the Pathétique. I don't know if you know that.
I know which one you're talking, yeah.
And he was wonderful on the organ, all the foot pedals and everything. I was kind of amazed. It was like driving an automatic car when he was playing this stuff.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, not an automatic, a manual.
A manual, that's right.
And I remember he was playing the Pathétique, and it starts out with a dun, 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 and, with a big pipe organ. It's wonderful.
It's really something. I'm not that good of an organist. I call myself a church organist, but in a different way.
Right.
I love to play hymns and kind of familiar to many people, but the organ, I don't know. This is kind of some people would say this isn't very proper of me to say, but I kind of liken an organ to driving a car, as you just mentioned, automatic or manual. There are some organs I just have to play because they're like driving a Corvette.
Right.
I mean, they are a race car. And by that, I mean volume. I mean powerful diapasons and other flutes and the brass instruments that are depicted I love to play a good pipe organ. There aren't very many of those around in St. George especially, but I want an organ like a sports car. I want it to be big, powerful, and so sometimes I'm a little hard on the organists or organs. I'm going, oh, come on. Who designed this? You should have, sometimes I feel like they're governing it,
right.
Like you would a car, like saying, no, we're only going to go 80, no faster than 80, John, and I'm going, come on. Right. I want to open this baby up.
That's what those nice straight roads to Vegas are for. No, right. I am not advocating that by any means.
That's right. We would never do that, Michael.
Not at all. Well, I'll tell you, just as a general rule in my life, a general rule of thumb, I never play an instrument that's powered by a AA battery. That's a little too small for me.
That's right.
Gotcha. Well, a few questions for you regarding St. George.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I'm not from Utah, and I'm not from southern Utah, certainly. In fact, I like the sun, but holy cow, could we please have a little variety sometimes?
Could we tone that down just a little bit, huh?
Well, could you work on that?
We had a little overcast today for you, Michael. But
I appreciate that. It made me very happy.
What we want is some of that in July, right?
Right.
Yeah, we got to work on that. But, let's see, what is it? Somebody says, one of my friends says, in St. George, we have 9 months of beautiful sunny weather in St. George and 3 months to prepare for the hereafter.
And I'd say we're well prepared.
Yeah. So anyway, I do think it's great. It's a great place to be, and in fact, I've got a sun on my shirt today with our logo because that's what it's all about, right? I think when you think of St. George, you think of Dixie Sunshine.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I don't know where we were going with that.
Yeah, I've got a direction, but I mean, you're a pleasure to talk to. We're going all over. I will tell you, in mentioning that I'm not from St. George, and there is the sun, something about your mayorship, if you will. I don't know if that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
But you do emphasize a lot of the outdoor recreation.
We do.
And there certainly is so much with the hiking and the climbing and just really good weather for getting outdoors, except maybe for those 3 months we were talking about there. But I wouldn't necessarily come to St. George from my background for the arts because, like I said, a lot of them are a little secret. We've mentioned St. George Musical Theater, which, of course, plays in the St. George Opera House.
Right.
But there are so many more things to offer around here. We've got the Electric Theater, if we just stick with theater. We've got Brigham's Playhouse, which is some wonderful things. We've got Kayenta Center for the Performing Arts. We also have the Shakespeare Festival up north if you go to Cedar City.
Tuacahn out in Ivans as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
It's actually quite an impressive list, especially for a smaller community, which is growing very, very quickly.
True.
Let me ask you, what else do we have going on as far as visual art, making art visible around the city?
Sure. Well, since we're sitting here on the campus of Dixie State, of course, we've got some great arts going on here, by our students, and so that's great with the Cox Performing Arts Center and the Eccles. We have some great venues and some great people, that are behind all these. The Southern Utah Heritage Choir and Lieto Voices, another choral group. The Southwest Symphony is incredible. We have the opportunity of what's called the Celebrity Concert Series that's also operated through the university that brings some wonderful things here to this campus, from time to time. But other types of things, we have some great dance groups, several of them that, just do wonderful things. And I don't even know all their names, but several of them right in the heart of St. George. And we have in the visual side, as you mentioned, we really are kind of we have a little bit of a budding arts district forming in the downtown kind of historic area of St. George in particular. As you walk along Main Street, especially starting up by the Opera House and then working your way down, you'll see a number of galleries, art galleries. We're fortunate to have those. Some of those are pretty, can I say, highbrow, considering Little St. George,
Right.
And so those are coming. We all the way down to next door to the Electric Theater. It's really part of the same complex, the Arrowhead Art Gallery, which is an art gallery of newly emerging artists. And we have some incredible art in that gallery too. And they rent space there. It's kind of meant to be a place for beginners. They can rent studio space if they want, and they're all full, so that's happening. Or they can just rent exhibit space through the Southern Utah Art Guild, who kind of manages that art gallery for us. So, wander through those different galleries, whether it's there at the Arrowhead or all the way up and down Main Street. There are a number of locations, and I hope there will be, many more. So we have some great ones there. We have the Watercolor Society that does some great things. We just finished with our last weekend the St. George Arts Festival, which of course is at Town Square,
right?
And that's been going on for 39 years.
Wow!
And now that's artists that are coming from all over the place, but a lot from Utah. They have to apply to get in. We turn away many, unfortunately. We just can't take everyone. But I have watched that even in the 22 years that I've lived here. I've watched that really go up a number of notches in terms of the quality, the diversity, and I think that helps our community as well, because some of those folks, in fact, I had one artist say to me, and he lives in northern Utah, he said, I want to have a gallery here. I want to spend more time here.
Fantastic.
And these are names that people would know. And so some of these folks have been coming every year for many years to show their art and sell their art at the Arts Festival. So all of those things help us. And the Arts Commission, as you probably want to talk about, they represent a number of the different artists, arts types and help us as we kind of try to plan what future things we ought to support in terms of the arts. And one of those, so I don't forget, I think, and it ties in with your question, and that is public art, such as Art Around the Corner. This is a not-for-profit group that's been going for, probably a couple decades in different forms, but for the last 15 years in particular, essentially what they are a group. I think they have one paid employee just to help kind of manage it, part-time.
Right.
The rest of them, they're all volunteers, serve on their board. Every year, they put out an RFP, request for proposals, from roughly 22 to 25 sculptors. And they say, would you like to exhibit your work in downtown St. George? And so what they are is it's a partnership between them and the city, the Art Around the Corner and the city. We provide pedestals for a rotating art gallery in the downtown area. And so we have on loan for a year, we have 22 to 25 art pieces that we get to look at as citizens and visitors, and all those pieces are for sale.
Right.
So with any luck, right, some businesses, some individuals will purchase at least some of that art, and we do. The city will always purchase a piece or two. The county sometimes will purchase one, and then businesses. And then we hope, then therefore we can expand that, and as we rotate to a new exhibit, which we're about to do next Saturday,
fantastic,
a week from now, they will rotate and put 22-ish new pieces out for us to view, and some of those will be purchased, and we'll get to have them stay in our community somewhere else, but somewhere within our community.
Right.
So I view that as a great public-private kind of partnership, where because in my opinion, arts, while some people say, well, you're just spending money, I don't think so. I think arts increase economic development, and it's been shown, and we've looked at that data. It brings people to here, to places like here, brings people to Santa Fe, to Scottsdale, right. To we know it works, and like you said earlier, I don't know that many people would call us an arts mecca, but we do have a budding arts district, and in both the performing and visual arts. And I'm excited about that.
And I think how wonderful that people can just go stroll around our downtown area.
Right.
And they'll be surrounded by this art. It's kind of a secret in plain sight.
That's right.
A lot of times.
That's right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been downtown, whether going to, the old Tabernacle or something like that. Yep. And I'll walk along and I'll see something that's been there for a few months, but it'll pop out to me and I'll say, hey, pretty cool.
That's right. And sometimes, we'll the ones that we own especially, we might relocate, and all of a sudden you see it.
Right.
Because it's not. In fact,
was that there? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. We've got one that we own that's right on the corner by the LDS Tabernacle, the corner of the roundabout where the Main Street and Tabernacle Street. There's a couple of, maybe two or three, I think 3 kids, and they're kind of swinging each other, and they kind of get lost in the tree. And so I'm like, we got to trim that tree so people will see the kid who sometimes looks like he's about to be stuck in the tree. So anyway, but we have a lot of fun with our public art in the downtown area.
What I'm going to tell you as well, on the way to Tuacahn, as a matter of fact, there are a few roundabouts that you go through, and there's one that has all of these sculptures of horses running, and a Native American on horseback and such. And I remember driving by it a few times thinking, oh, those are nice, they're pretty stationary. But something that I don't know that a lot of people realize, and I'm asking you to observe this with caution, please be in the passenger seat when you do look at this. But it's brilliantly constructed in that if you're driving around, it's laid out in so far that as you're going, it looks like the horses are running. And it
Yep.
looks like this landscape is moving past you with
It's
living
alive.
horses.
Yeah.
Yeah, check that out.
Yeah, isn't that great? So true. I've noticed that too. And again, not that he was born here, but Ed Halovka, I think is how you say his name, is the artist, and he
Hmm.
lives here. He lives in, I think, Ivans.
Tremendous.
And he's done more than just that for this area. But fantastic local artists in some cases have done some of these great works.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
And Mayor Pike, thank you very much. We are going to go to a short break right now where you're going to be hearing a piece from Percy Granger, The Lost Lady Found. And then when we return, we'll have a little more time with the mayor as well as another guest. And we'll get into revealing some more secrets from St. George. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back I can't speak English. We'll be back in just a few moments. We're back for On the Arts with Michael A. Harding. I do have an apology for all of the listeners out there. I told you were going to be listening to Percy Grainger, and somehow Beethoven stuck his head in there. So you were just listening to Symphony Number 3 in E-flat major by Beethoven, one of the majors of classical music today anyhow. Now, we do have another guest in the studio right now. Of course, we still have Mayor Pike, but we also have Paul Weens. And Paul is currently the conductor of the St. George Chamber Singers and has actually quite an impressive background. I'd like to just let you know a few things about that, and then I'd like to have him help you get to know him. He was a teacher for a total of 44 years. And taught in high school, taught around, and ended up at Wheaton College in Illinois, where he taught for 31 years, so had quite a good tenure, a good run there. And, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hoping a good run.
It was a good run.
Fantastic. And he had some honors with the concert choirs that he led at Wheaton. They were asked to perform in a lot of different venues, some impressive venues, and for some events. What were some of those, Paul?
Well, the epitome of choral honor in the United States is to be invited to perform at national ACDA conventions. That's the American Choral Directors Association conventions. And an applicant has to provide a recording from 3 years of his choir performing, and it's reviewed blindly by a group of choral conductors. And then if you're invited to the national convention, then you perform for sometimes several thousand choral directors.
Your peers.
Yeah, who have a pretty good ear for what's right and what's wrong. And so I was able to take the Wheaton Concert Choir to 2 national conventions, 3 regional conventions in the Midwest, and, of course, several state.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I mean, that in and of itself, that's certainly not your whole career, but that in and of itself is something that's rather impressive, should give us a hint of who you are.
Sure.
I do have a question for you, as I guess any interviewer would occasionally. You've been all over and, of course, spent some time in Illinois, some lengthy time in Illinois. The mayor and I were just talking about how St. George isn't necessarily a place you would think of to come for the arts. Let me ask you, clearly someone with a background, a very solid background in the arts, why St. George? Why are you here?
My wife and I were pulling an RV into southwestern Utah and came in through the east entrance of Zion on a rainy, foggy, snowy day, and it was mysterious. And we found our way safely to St. George that evening and stayed in a local RV park. We found here a good church in the Grace Episcopal Church that we appreciated. The real estate taxes were low. The houses that were being built for people our age were, we thought, exceptional. The views were tremendous, and we were ready to start a new life. We didn't really think that we wanted to continue the life that we had led for decades. We wanted to just start over in a way.
Got it.
At a new place.
So kind of the artistic witness protection is what you're doing here.
But I didn't come here because there was a lot of arts activity. I didn't know how much arts I knew I would be giving up the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
And all the other things in Chicago, but I wanted to get out of terrible traffic and high real estate taxes, and I wanted to see something new.
Gotcha. Well, I do want to thank you personally. You've brought something wonderful to St. George. Like I said, you've been the conductor of the St. George Chamber Singers since 2015 when it was founded?
3 years ago, yes. This is our 3rd year.
Fantastic. And how did you go about getting this going?
Rachel Cox.
She's been on this show, as a matter of fact.
On the show is one of the outstanding musicians in this town, soprano with a master's degree in voice. And her father called me up one day and said, "We're thinking of starting a chamber group. Would you be interested?" And he described the group as, "We're tired of choirs in which people are absent all the time. We want our singers to prepare their music before they come to rehearsal."
Right.
And so these guys were describing what I call a hardcore choral experience. And that's the only kind of choral experience I'm interested in.
Right.
the only kind.
Well, I have a question for the two of you, and that touches very, very nicely on that. Yes, in St. George, we do have a lot of artistic offerings, a lot of them, as I've said, secrets when it comes down to it, and we'd like to blow the lid off those secrets. But one of the things I'm impressed with is the fact that a lot of people have taken piano lessons. They have taken voice lessons or taken dance classes or workshops or things of that sort. And yet, I firmly believe there is a difference between just being able to do something and tinkering with something and, as you put it, hardcore art and such. I do teach. There is a question here. I promise. It's coming out. I'm an actor. I do like my own voice. I've never been shy about that. But I tell my students all the time that just because you can play a piano, that doesn't necessarily make you a pianist. Just because you can tell a joke, that doesn't mean you're an actor. It's the same thing. I can fix a toilet. As a matter of fact, I have done that, but I do not consider myself a plumber. Please know this is not plugging myself over the air for that kind of work. Let me ask you, what is hardcore choral?
Well, first of all, it starts with me being interested intellectually, emotionally, academically in concert music. And by that I mean music by real composers.
Right.
Some that you can recognize, like Bach or Britten or Brahms, and some that you wouldn't recognize, like Ligeti or some other people, Stravinsky maybe. So, but it's music that the larger musical community understands has been examined by lots of musicians and has been deemed beautiful or worthy of our time. Then you need musicians who are willing to tackle it. And you're right, a person can have piano training but not be willing to come to 10 rehearsals in a row. So it's that combination of training, love for the arts. In this case, I will pardon me if I use high art, and the commitment, the ability to commit to 10 or so 2-hour rehearsals and basically not miss unless they're sick. In fact, when our singers are contagious but can get out, they'll come to the rehearsal but sit 20 or 30 feet away from the chorus so that they rehearse with their ears.
Right.
Rather than their voice.
Yeah, I think that's what you're touching on is what you're saying very clearly, I should say, not just touching on it, is something that impresses me when you have people who are serious about their craft and not just about, a lot of people can imitate the sound of Pavarotti or, they can play the piano like Rachmaninoff did, maybe for a few measures, by the way. But I like what you're saying about it being important to them, the willingness to study it, the willingness to put themselves into creating the craft.
With tongue-in-cheek, we sometimes say we're having serious fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to tell my actors all the time, stop having fun, but I think that's on the flip side there.
It's a fun that doesn't take a giddy laugh and a pasty smile. It can be a frown and intense work, and that's just fun.
Right. I have my wife and I, we talk about the kind of theater that I like. And please know that I do enjoy all sorts of theater and such. Musical theater, I thoroughly enjoy it. Go to Me and My Girl from the 1920s. Love it. I love Les Miserables, all sorts of styles. But there is nothing more satisfying, sounds so highbrow to me, but nothing more fun, if you will, than a play that really punches me in the gut.
Yeah.
One that really makes me think, one that I, and again, this sounds so highbrow, but one that I walk out truly affected, almost a different person. There's a play called Grand Magic that a lot of people don't know by one of Luigi Pirandello's contemporaries. And I went to it not knowing what the play was. I was ready for something lighthearted. This actually happened very soon after 9/11. So a lot of theaters were hesitant to put on very, very deep plays or plays that would take the audience down. And I'll tell you, I thought I needed to laugh, but after seeing this play, I felt better than if I had had a nice deep belly laugh. I felt really affected and very excited, reinvigorated.
Good art is transformative and transcendent.
Absolutely. That's where a lot of people ask me why I like Shakespeare so much. That's my That's my specialty. And I'll tell you, I always tell them it's because he made a primer for being alive. He made a primer for being human. And I would say he's not the only one. It's not just the spoken word, but music and such things that can truly stir you. And of course, that goes to visual art. The mayor and I were just talking about how we'd have visual art around town so that people could see it and be inspired by it and such. Paul and I have been talking here.
It's good.
And you mentioned you've got kids who are into the arts, and also you grew up in a family with siblings that are into the arts. How do you feel about that? Oh, gosh, boy, I talked myself into a major corner here a little bit. Okay, I'm going to rephrase that so I don't put anybody on the spot. Is it just as effective to have an opportunity where people can just dabble in the arts, if you will, for what I consider a community experience? And by the way, I have never looked at community theater or community arts in a negative way. There is a negative stereotype with community theater, for example. People think, oh boy, community theater, it's only going to be partially there. But I have to say, I've seen some amazing community theater. I've also seen some that was pretty substandard as far as I was concerned. But I've also seen some amazing professional theater, and also some that I considered pretty substandard. You mentioned, Paul, that it's the love of it, the want to come to it and study it and such, and I am putting words in your mouth a little bit.
No, actually the word amateur is based, I think its roots are in love. So when you talk about an amateur musician, it's a musician who makes the art only because of the love for it. So when I conduct amateurs, I am even more careful than when I conduct professionals,
right?
Because they're more tender. They're not in there for any money. They're not trying to become famous or lift their professional standards, but the amateur is in there just for the love of it. And I've conducted, for example, a large community choir at Wheaton for 23 years. We had between 80 and 140 singers, depending upon what we were doing. And they loved to sing, and I loved to conduct them. But it's a different beast, if you will, than a symphony orchestra at the college, or my concert choir at Wheaton College, or the chamber singers here, which is a group of 24 singers, highly auditioned. Almost all of them are very comfortable being alone as a performer instead of a group of 25 or 30 in their section.
Right. Well, that's I'm actually anxious to hear. I have never been to a concert for the St. George Chamber Singers. Okay. I'm quite excited to. And I want to let you know I'm getting giddy hearing your attitude towards this. I've never been in a place where there are so many people who were musically trained. And by that, I mean people who have had the lessons or have been, as we said earlier, kind of tongue-in-cheek forced by their parents to work on it.
Some training.
Some training. And I've actually been concerned for a lot of people up in Salt Lake, for example, when I was at the Pioneer Theater Company. Les Miserables came into town and they did their group auditions. And I think I met everybody and their mother and their pets in some cases going to these auditions. And I'll tell you, several people with amazing voices actually got in, and got taken on tour with them. But one of the things that really brought reality to me is when their voices were fried 4 months later. And yeah, they could sing beautifully, but it didn't have that base of training.
Well, it's better, even in my view, if one goes into pop music or musicals, that there is classical, in the case of voice training. Because, of course, you can fry yourself singing opera, or recently I heard that a symphony orchestra horn player was suing a symphony because he went deaf because it's so loud. That's another kind of hazard in instrumental music because the music was so loud around him. But in vocal music, you have to be careful with your voice, whether you're in the chamber singers or the Southwest Heritage Choir or singing musicals particularly.
Right. Well, a lot of these, the folks that got cast, they were cast as swings. So, of course, they had to be ready for various roles. And these roles were not vocally similar by any means. They were used up, spit, and thrown out. So I think that is a danger. That's why I'm really excited to see not only do we have all of these opportunities in St. George for people to participate at a level of when they can make it,
Right.
if you will, but also we have a more serious group. Let me ask you, how do you become a part of that serious group?
Every fall, in the beginning of September, we hold auditions. And, of course, people can reach us online through stgeorgechambersingers.org. But we hold auditions, and nobody who's been a member is guaranteed a place. In that sense, it's completely democratic. So there's no heritage. Just because you've been in the group, you have to win your place all over again. And what that means is that somebody who comes into town or who just heard about us has an actual equal chance to become a member of the St. George Chamber Singers.
That's fantastic. I do love that sense of competition, not because everything should be knocked down, dragged out,
means
but
it's open.
Yeah. I like how you put that. Very, very much so. I have to admit, I came from a place of competition with music, and I'm very proud of my musical experience and such, but it was competition. It wasn't, oh my gosh, I get to be a part of this. It was, I'm going to beat that violinist over there. To be the concertmaster was the status of
Are you a violin player?
I am. Now, please know I'm saying violin player. Violinist, I used to be.
I see.
Now I can play the violin.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see, and I just want to make sure we get everything in here before we go. You mentioned the Arts Commission and how that can help organizations. Could you give me a little more information on that, either of you?
Well, I can start at least. In fact, it's funny because, I only have lived here 22 years, so a few more years maybe than you, Paul. But it's, one of the ways that I got into city government was the Arts Commission. I really don't know quite how it happened, but someone found out that I played the piano a bit, as you said. I was once a pianist. Now I play the piano a bit. And I love the piano and I love singing, and I've sung in choirs, never professionally, just always, but I do love it. It's a big part of who I am, at least in my, downtime. But someone heard I played the piano, someone heard I played the organ a bit, and so they said, hey, we're trying to build a new organ recital hall. We want you on this board. Well, it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately, but then the mayor found out I was on that board, and he said, I need someone that represents, that type of artist, if you will, on the Arts Commission. It's usually made up of around 10 or 12 people, depends on the time. And so I was appointed to the Arts Commission. I don't know, this is probably 15 years ago, maybe a little more than that. And so the Arts Commission is really there to help recommend and guide the city as it relates to, any type of art, visual, performing, and some of that, sometimes we pay more attention to them than others, and we should always pay attention to them. But it depends too who's on it. But they also fill a very important role, especially now with the passing of the Recreation, Arts, and Parks tax, which is a 0.1% addition to the sales tax a few years ago. That goes towards, and it amounts to approximately, maybe $400,000 a year that we have available to us for the arts, and then recreation and arts or parks is another piece. That's what the Arts Commission does. They review grant applications of all these organizations that apply, and they recommend to the City Council, here's who you ought to fund for this year. And so it's a great opportunity to help strengthen our arts organizations. That's really
So Mayor Pike, I'm really grateful. Of course, I've heard of the rap tax, and I describe the St. George Chamber Singers as being a budget like we're on a shoestring budget,
Yeah.
And the pennies we talk about are ridiculous, but that's a lot of arts organizations are like that.
You bet.
And without a little help from the civic government, I just think it might be another 10 years before the city is big enough or the there's money to do it, and there wouldn't be as many startups in a way. These things are, the St. George Chamber Singers is a startup. And we get a little money from the rap tax, and we get a flooring company and somebody to donate a little money here and there, and I work for basically nothing, and that's how it goes in the arts.
You make it work.
You make it work.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I do want to let you both know it is an absolute pleasure talking to you. Paul, this is the first time we've ever met.
Yes.
And also, Mayor Pike, I've seen you from a distance, but never met you formally. One of the fears of a radio host is that you'll get somebody on here who doesn't talk, or someone who...
no problem with us, right, Paul?
I don't think we have a problem.
Well, and I want to let you know it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I hope you'll both consider coming back. Oftentimes you'll think, oh, how am I going to fill this entire segment? I could talk for hours with both of you, and I appreciate you coming in. I do just want to say to our listeners, art, you can love it, whether you're doing it or appreciating it. There are all sorts of different levels at which you can do it. I'm very thankful for the opportunities we have around here to have, as you put it, hardcore, serious delving into the arts, and I hope nobody will ever keep the fact that they might not consider themselves a pianist or a singer from giving it a shot in trying to find that love.
So one thing I, of course, want to get in as a plug for our upcoming concerts, if I may.
Absolutely.
So on Saturday night, we're performing at 7:30 in the Eccles Recital Hall, the little 250-seat hall, which is a beautiful place.
Gorgeous. Wonderful sound.
Yes, it is, and adjustable acoustics and all that. And we're performing a wonderful program, mostly a cappella, Brahms, Britten, and who else am I performing? Bach, and then a number of other smaller composers in a number of languages: Hungarian, German, Latin, in English. So there'll be quite a variety of music, and that's a free concert at 7:30 Saturday. Almost 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, April 20, the St. George Chamber Singers will present a ticketed concert at the new Kayenta Performing Arts Center. You may know that facility just opened last fall.
Right.
And it's a beautiful, particularly for theater, but it's meant to be a multi-purpose performance hall. And so we're looking forward to a performance there on Friday night, April 20.
Tremendous. And just so you know, yes, I am hosting an event there right now, the Second Act New Works Festival with playwrights around the country. And I certainly will be putting plugs for these in future shows.
Good.
Just to make sure people are aware. We do have to move on here, but thank you very much to my guests. This has been On the Arts with Michael Harding.